Hey, my name's Zachary Roberts, and I'm going to be reading off my PowerPoint for my project. It's called the GDP Highest and Lowest States. Um, so let's get this started. So first off, I want to talk about the definition of GDP, which is gross domestic product. Um, Gross domestic product, so it's basically the monetary total value of all services and goods in a limited time period. Um, So that's the definition of it. And something that I found really interesting was figuring out the whole total GDP of the United States. So after doing some research, I found out that our GDP is around 21.43 trillion, which is about 6 trillion more than the next highest, which is China at 14.34. So yeah, we're honestly actually closer to 7 trillion above. And then you have Japan and some others, but we have by far the most, and this is a good thing. This, in short terms, means that our economy is growing at a rapid pace. Our goods and services are expanding, trade's going well. Um, this doesn't include the national debt, but it includes just looking at the raw data of GDP in our country. And so something I was interested in is figuring out, I know that we have the largest GDP out of any country, but by state, I was curious what states have the highest gross domestic product. And so I did some research and I found out that the three major ones are California, Texas, and New York. I was a little surprised about my findings. I expected New York to be one or two, and I thought it would be by a lot more than what it is. California is by far the highest gross domestic product out of any of our states, which means it's the wealthiest state in our country. And this country, and the next one is Texas, and Texas is at 9.2%. So that means that their final goods and services represents 9.2% of our countries, and California is 14.8, which is a ridiculous amount. Um, and New York, this is what I was a little surprised on. New York was only 7.6, which is high. It's the third most, which is a lot, but not as much as I was expecting. Um, and on to the next part. So those were the highest three, but I was curious what the lowest state GDP was, and after doing reading up on it, looking at some videos, looking at some statistics and graphs, I was able to find that there's two states that have significantly lower gross domestic product than any other states. And I was completely wrong. I thought it was going to be Alaska was going to be number one. It is one of the lowest ones for GDP, but it wasn't number one. But the two lowest states make up only 0.02% of the country's GDP. They have around the same amount, and it's Wyoming and Vermont. So Vermont has relatively about 0.19%, and Wyoming has 0.20%. So what this tells me is a lot, honestly. So the one thing that I was able to learn from this is the reasons that these two states have such a small amount of GDP, which is what I was so interested in. Um, so these states have low GDP because the population growth and the lack of people working is much smaller, more relatively lower than the other states. So I was reading an article in Wyoming, for example. They don't have as big as a population. There's not many people and companies and things going on there, and because of that, the population growth is a lot slower, and therefore there's less people working in the States, and so there's less goods and services and products that they're trading to other places, um, as well as geographically. What you can find there, you could find in other countries. It doesn't have anything special. Like Florida has oranges, for example, which is always going to keep it relevant. Which, fun fact, is the fourth highest state for GDP. And so the reason that I did this is because I believe it's really important for many reasons. But I think the main reason we should care about it because we should know where our wealth is coming from by our state. I think that's really key because we would normally look at countries, but looking at selected areas could give us a better understanding of what we need to fix and maybe if we should be putting more resources in these places instead of maybe keeping them in a few. The reason I think this is important is because science and research has shown that humans are increasing at a rapid pace, significantly. So we're gonna have to have more places for people to live, and one way we can do that is by helping the states that have lower domestic product, being able to find ways to make more revenue. And so I think this starts by having maybe regulations or rules to how many people could live in a state. I really don't know, but being able to help states like Vermont that are barely representing anything, even by a little bit, I feel like would go a long way in our country. And eventually, I think that's what's going to happen because places like California eventually will be too overpopulated to live in. And our modern medicine is only going to keep us living longer, so our population is going to grow and grow. And I thought this was really important so we can kind of plan for our future, kind of figure out as a race, like as humans, what we're going to be doing and how we're going to be doing it. And some questions I had for my audience. So what ideas do you have for increasing population growth in GDP states? For me, I was talking before about regulations, but I don't necessarily think that that is the right idea to restrict people to go to a certain place. But I couldn't really think or find any other resources telling me something else. And my other question is for you guys. Where do you think Massachusetts ranks on the GDP scale? So I was actually a little stunned. I thought we'd be top 5, but you'd have to go look and see yourself what we are, but we are not top 5. And those are my questions, and I used 5 different resources. I used PowerPoint, and thank you very much. My name's Zachary Roberts, and yep, the end. Thank you.